Good morning, everybody. It's 10 in the morning. There was a little oopsie with my work rota, so I thought I would come into university, into the only room I know to have any soundproofing foam in it, light the fire, and open up my Stellarian fic on one of the Macs there. Because it's been a busy week, and I would love to take a little bit of time to enter that universe, to forget about things, and perhaps you want to join me. I do add that I know nothing about sound design, and it's probably as reverby or worse than my own room, but I know that the last episode was a little quiet because I was trying so hard not to pop into the mic. We are learning as we go. Without any further ado, let's dive back in. 2.5 weeks before our journey begins. Lyra awoke to a commotion above her in the forest. Although she had taken care to stay hidden, napping in the afternoon had meant she had been found by evening light. She was half awake and terrified. Luckily, she had been sleeping on top of the sword, and she held it fearfully now. It did not seem to faze her company, who were a 5-strong band of... Were these bandits? Lyra didn't detect much friendliness coming from them. The noise that had awoken her was the sound of her bag being snatched from her side. She grabbed for it, but the man holding it pulled it away, sneering. Another spoke. "What are you doing out here in the forest, all alone?" he leered. "With a bag full of money," the thief added. The leader of the group leaned over and looked inside the satchel. His eyebrows shot up. "Holy fuck, this thing must have 1,000 G in it. What the fuck?" Lyra had been distracted and was not listening. The sword had been talking to her. "Lyra, hold on to me and I'll do the rest. I've got these guys." "You seem awfully confident," she replied, out loud. "Shit." The bandits heard her and began to laugh. "You trying to talk shit? You've got balls." The leader stepped back and waved his hand dismissively as Lyra scrambled to her feet. "Fuck her up." One of the bandits began to move, and the sword swung Lyra around to face him. Lyra felt intuition spike through her whole body. Although she had never learned to fight, she tensed and took a defensive stance. Her arms flew and caught the blade of the bandit's dagger with the sword's barbed edge. There was a pause. The bandit was stunned at her reflexes. And so, as it happens, was Lyra. Jerkily, Lyra pulled in. The bandit flew forward, shaken from his balance. He turned back towards her, but too slowly. Lyra swung around, plunging the sword into the side of his head. The others watched in silence as he fell slowly to the floor. Lyra's whole body had been fizzing with adrenaline and fear. The connection to this sword was making her act like a trained fighter, and she couldn't believe it. Blood had spattered her shirt. Now she felt this power, the fear began to turn to anger. The sword seemed to read her body, her surroundings. How dare they try to hurt me? How dare they take my money? She was ready for the next bandit. 2 of them moved at once, running at her with renewed force. These, too, fell to Lyra and her sword. The connection wasn't just with the blade. Lyra felt the sword pulling her away from blows defensively, and her arms and legs moved as an extension of the sword, kicking, elbowing, twisting. The men had barely fallen when Lyra heard the leader speak from behind her. "Fuck this!" The final 2 bandits began to run away. "Come back! Give me back my money!" Lyra hollered, running after them. But they were too fast. She watched them go and cursed them loudly. Her heart eventually began to slow, and Lyra returned to the 3 corpses littered where she had been sleeping. She had been impressed at the apathy she had felt when she had killed them. She had never done anything like that before. But it became apparent now that the apathy had stemmed from adrenaline and necessity. Now she was calm. She fell to her knees. She would have thrown up if there were any food in her stomach. Lyra was gripped by the urge to get as far away from the bodies as possible, but stopped as an awful thought took hold of her. These bodies were resources, and she was desperate. Exhausted and shaking, she stripped them of any clothes that weren't soaked in gore. Although it was summer, the nights were cold, and she needed layers badly. She stole the only bag between them, hanging it over her shoulder where her other bag had been only hours ago. Well, at least this one was lighter. It was bloodier, though. Feeling something cold on the back of her neck, Lyra looked up to the sky. It was beginning to rain. She lay on the floor and would have fallen into despair if not for the voice sounding in her head at that moment. "Lyra, find somewhere dry." "You know what? I think I won't." Lyra huffed, wiped the tears from her eyes, and grabbed the sword. "All the romance from being a runaway princess has well and truly worn off, and now I'm covered in blood. You bad and evil sword. I hate you." But time moved on, as it tends to do, and Lyra dragged herself along until she found a huge tree with a hollow in it. 3 squirrels were huddled in the dry leaves. Yesterday, Lyra might have jumped in fear at the little creatures, but now she scooped them out into the rain as if it was nothing. "Sorry, I'm a princess, and princesses outrank squirrels." With the drama safely behind her, Lyra turned to the sword, propped up against the inner wall of the tree. "How did you make me do that, sword?" "I can feel your intentions through our connection. My first duty is to protect your life, no matter what. But after that, my fighting style will reflect your intentions. Defend, injure, kill, you know. When the first bandit attacked, I acted for you. He was coming for your life. But the second and third, I felt it in you. You wanted to kill them. And you know what else I felt? In that moment, you liked it." Lyra prepared to talk back to the sword, but hung her head embarrassed. What it had said was true. There had been a thrill in the fight. "And it's fantastic." Lyra's head snapped back up. She hadn't expected the sword to continue. "Lyra Cassiopeia, the emotion and willpower I feel in you is as strong as some of your strongest ancestors. Although it's clear you have no fighting skill or experience. We can work on it." "My ancestors? Wow." Lyra pondered for a moment on all the things the sword might have seen in its time. "Do you have a name, sword?" Lyra asked. As she spoke, she opened up her stolen bag and began absent-mindedly to sort through its contents. "I have had many names. Each Cassiopeia who wielded me has given me a name, under which I serve them. Now you have fought with me. It is only appropriate you give me one now. Pausing her search, Lyra narrowed her eyes in thought. She looked slyly at the sword, and didn't speak for some time. I dub thee Whackus Bonkus. Wait. No. Yep, that's your name. I am an ancient magical heirloom. Do you really mean to say you will call me to your side with a battle cry of Whackus Bonkus? Oh yeah. Lyra smiled for the first time in what must have been hours. The discomfort coming from the sword was palpable and hilarious. I pierce and slice. The name itself is misleading. Never once have I whacked or bonked. Well, there was that one time where... But really? Oh, shit. Lyra interrupted Whackus Bonkus. She had drawn out a crumpled piece of paper from the bandit's bag and smoothed it flat. It was very nearly dark outside, and Lyra wished she had been taught how to cast simple light spells instead of all the diplomatic princessy crap. Holding it at the tree's opening, she could just make out the text by the last scraps of twilight. Lyra Cassiopeia, heir to the Cassiopeia throne, kidnapped. 2,000 G reward, if brought to the palace personally. 300 G reward for information leading to her safe return. It is in the kingdom's interest that the princess be returned safely to her father and betrothed. Oh, that is not good. I suppose it was a bit much to hope that my absence would just sort of be overlooked. The text was set over an official portrait of the princess. Lyra remembered having it painted. Being told not to fidget 1,000 times bored nearly to tears. The painter had captured that. There was no life behind the painting's eyes. It was regal and dull. And fake, Lyra thought. In fact, the more she looked at it, the better she felt. The painter has brushed out all my flaws, she muttered to herself. It would be easy to forgive those bandits for not recognizing me. This picture is far too pretty. And Lyra couldn't help but smile. They think I've been kidnapped? This poster will be Gideon's handiwork. That knobhead couldn't imagine that I'd want to run away from him. That should put people off the trail at least. They won't be looking for a girl on her own. But still, this is dangerous. I bet they've pasted this bleeding poster up in every corner of the kingdom. Lyra sat for a minute and studied the poster, deep in thought. She perked up and grabbed Whackus by the handle. Whackus, you're not the only one getting a new name tonight. From this moment forward, I will be Mitzi Harper, and even you are to refer to me as such. Without waiting for Whackus to respond, she pulled her long hair to the side, placed the sword behind her neck, and sliced it off. Okay, this is like a little break. I just checked how long the audio was, and it's 13 minutes, so I am going to read you a little bit more in this episode, because maybe you're trying to fall asleep, who knows? Maybe the thought of having to stop is making you deeply upset, as it makes me, obviously. So, we're going to have a little bit more. I just have to say, I was trying hard not to laugh during the bit where she dubs him Whackus Bonkus. I basically, styled this whole universe around the fact that she gets a talking sword called Whackus Bonkus. I live for it. It's fucking great. And the bandits bit's a little rough. You've got to get through it, though. Because then you get the Whackus Bonkus bit. You have to work for it sometimes. Oh, who knows if I'll even add this bit in. But we all enjoy it. You gotta know what's going through my head when when I'm reading. Because, you gotta know that I'm loving it too. And every sentence that I read, I haven't read in ages. I'm not revising this shit. I'm literally, experiencing it live again, which was the point. Which is just so exciting. So, we'll have a little bit more. We'll see how it goes. I'm just gonna read. 1 week before our journey begins. So it's been another week and a half. Oh, it's this bit. Oh my fucking god. Oh, this is exciting. You guys are gonna like this bit. 1 week before our journey begins. Drake drummed his fingers on the desk and looked around the empty sheriff's office distractedly. This was some start to his career. He had travelled down to the palace as the princess's new guard, only to discover that there was no princess to guard. She had run away the very night he had been employed. With his reason for employment absent, he was sent on the hunt for the missing princess, alongside several other guards from the palace. That was 2 weeks ago. Now he was in the town of Loriel, about as far from the Stellarian palace as you could possibly get in all the country. The horse he had been assigned, which had misbehaved terribly the entire journey, had come down with a cold. And serves him right, thought Drake. It looked like he'd be staying in town for a few days. The truth was that Drake was barely riding trained, as they do not travel by horse in the city of Mythicas. He had, in fact, been leading the poor horse badly on his travels. It was as likely as not that the horse was faking the cold for a bit of rest, and I don't blame him. Through the open door, Drake saw a large black bird eyeing him up from the treetops, and smiled. George had made it, then. This was the pet raven Drake had been taming during the last year of his studies in Mythicas boarding school. He hadn't been sure if the bird would follow him down from the famous city in the clouds, but he had been pleasantly surprised by George's distant yet reliable companionship. Drake reminded himself to save some bread or meat from lunch to feed him. The door's opening was darkened suddenly by the entrance of 2 people. In front was a tiny girl. She must have had halfling blood in her. She was draped in deep purple and blue robes, dotted with white stars, and carried a twisted wooden staff. Drake had never seen a wizard before, but he would have bet money that this here was a pint-sized wizard. Behind was a huge, imposing set of clunky armour that Drake assumed must have a man inside somewhere. Drake straightened in confusion when he realised that the man was bound in handcuffs, shoulders drooping in resignation. The rope from the cuffs was being held by the girl. The girl saw Drake and got behind the great lug of a prisoner, shoving him towards Drake. As she did this, she addressed her charge. "Well, it has been a pleasure and a privilege, but this is where our correspondence ends. Hey! Hey! Drake was aware that this was directed to him, but he was confused. The girl seemed incredulous. Don't just stand there. Book him in. Book him in? Now the girl paused. She looked Drake up and down slowly. I haven't seen you before, she said. You don't work here, do you? No, Drake replied. I've been waiting for someone to show up for 10 minutes, but nobody's here. Oh my god, Sheriff Damon will be having one of his famous 2-hour fucking lunch breaks. The girl muttered to herself as she shoved past Drake and behind the sheriff's desk, opening the door to the room behind as if she owned the place. Art! She shouted through the door. I've got a bounty for you. Techo, is that you? A voice replied. Hang on, I'll be right out. The man Drake saw the voice belonged to was Arthur Damon, Sheriff of Lowreal. He was middle-aged, quite tall, and was wearing a shirt of white material that looked more suitable for upholstering a chair than wearing on your body. He looked contented. Well, 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 Techo, he said to the girl. It's been a while. Have you been out of town or something? Something like that. Look, take this guy off my hands, will you? Techo asked impatiently. I've got places to be. Name? Techo poked the bounty, who mumbled. Vance Bren. Sheriff Damon sighed, seeming to think. Oh, Techo, I don't think we got a bounty out on any Vance Bren at the moment. Techo sighed, putting a hand to her head as if she were developing a sheriff-related tension headache. Check your books, Art. It is Sheriff Damon to you, you know. Despite the protest, the sheriff took a thick file out from his desk and began to page through it. While he looked, Drake, who had been watching the whole event, spoke for the first time. That guy is huge. Did you take him out on your own? He asked Techo, incredulous. Before Techo got a chance to answer, the sheriff pulled out a certificate. Techo had been right. There was a bounty out on this guy. Drake wondered who this girl was to be knowing the books better than the sheriff himself. Who, this guy? Techo spoke distractedly, watching the sheriff count out coins. Small fry bounty, only worth 50 crims. Which is daylight robbery. She directed that last comment toward the sheriff. I'm surprised I don't just turn to daylight robbery. Sheriff Damon raised an eyebrow as he handed her the money. If you did, we'd have a real problem on our hands. He allowed Techo to remove the handcuffs before putting his own on the bounty. With the admin done, Techo began to leave. She had seemed bored and impatient for the whole exchange. Hey, the sheriff shouted after her suddenly. Where's your big friend today? Ludwig is busy. And then she was gone. There's a little asterisk by the word crims when Techo suggests that the bounty is worth only 50 crims. And now I will read the asterisk. Crims, reader, is a coin of Stellarian currency. Stellarian money is of coloured metal, with each colour indicating a different value. A crim, or crimson, is a smaller denomination than a gold, and a higher denomination than a reen, or an ultramarine. The lowest denomination of money is a viridian. This is the only currency that is not round, instead in an awkward crystalline shape. You may hear Stellarians calling it shards, glass, or shrapnel. That night, Tekko had not expected to see Drake again, but fate seemed determined that their paths cross once more. Lowreel had 2 taverns. The smaller one, the Crown, was the sort of bar you went to if you were getting bored of having a wallet full of coins and a shirt free of bloodstains. You might have seen Tekko loitering nearby the Crown if she were working, but she was not working tonight. She was at the Shooting Star, or the Star for short. Larger, busier, and overall just less awful, this was where most of the town's inhabitants would come out for an evening. Tekko had used to sit up at the bar when she drank alone, but after having slept with one of the barmaids last month, she had started taking her drinks to one of the small tables in the back. Note to self: stop sleeping with people you're going to have to make eye contact with in the future, she thought from her chair. She missed the height the tall bar stools used to give her. This town is decidedly becoming too small. Despite her predicament, the Star was bustling and the warm, bright atmosphere cheered Tekko. She began to count her blessings. At least I got that bounty without taking any hits today, she thought to herself. It's risky work without Ludwig on hand to heal me, but I haven't worked in weeks and we needed those crims. And Ludwig, he's turned a corner these last few days. It was true. After taking the cure, the blue colour had stopped seeping further into Ludwig's veins. Now a few days had passed, and it was finally beginning to fade altogether. He was laughing more often. Tekko took a long drink from a glass that seemed comically oversized in her hands, trying to ignore thoughts of what might have happened if she hadn't been able to afford Ludwig's cure. She felt eyes on the back of her neck and looked around. The barmaid was looking at her prettily. Oh God, she thought, not this again. An unfortunate side effect of being a terrible flirt, serial good time addict, and overall general lad had been that Tekko did occasionally break a few hearts. She did not need anyone having a crush on her. That wasn't what she was looking for. Next to the barmaid was the tavern owner, Pan. Pan was heavily bearded and pleasantly rotund. Pan liked Tekko, partly because she kept ruffians away by her very presence as a bounty hunter, but mainly because she kept the old tavern standing with her regular custom. Right now, Pan was talking business with a lean and strange-looking woman, clad in flamboyant, embroidered performer's clothes. Tekko had been in town for long enough that this was a familiar sight. Here was Antonia, an eccentric local who would be trying to get booked to perform here at the Star. Tekko had never really spoken to Antonia, but had seen her here more often this past couple of weeks, never drinking, always looking for work. Tekko sympathized with her. Almost everyone in Lowreel was tight for money. More often than not, they knew someone who was sick with the blue decay. But a cure for that would cost as much as someone like Antonia might make in 6 months. The world is going to shit, Teco thought pleasantly, taking another drink and swinging her legs. Antonia's perseverance seemed to be paying off. She was shaking Pan's hand excitedly. Teco wondered when the gig would be booked for. The odds were she'd be here to see it.